Billy Corgan, frontman of the Smashing Pumpkins.
How do you feel about that many bands name you name Smashing Pumpkins as its main influence?
It's a great honor. It's a really great honor because we took so much from other bands too. So we feel like when people celebrate Smashing Pumpkins, they're also celebrating the influences of Smashing Pumpkins, which is really the tradition of music. Some people call it stealing. I don't mind. Like some people say, when I hear my influence in a band's music, they get upset. I actually feel very flattered. So I think this is fine. As long as they're not ripping me off, like stealing my song, I'm okay.
Compared to the previous records, because in the early years it was mostly your work. You stated that this album your new members helped you a lot. So.
Yeah. I think maybe to clarify that, in the 90s making those records, there were a lot of issues internally with the band, so I ended up having to do a lot of the work. But we still work together. But it's more of an argument over who plays what on what song. This is now more honest, and I say, I think that's for you, this is for me. So it's much more open, and in that way, because there's more open dialogue, if I tell them what is good or bad, that gives them an opportunity to fix. But in the 90s, if I talk, they won't listen to me. Certain band members in Smashing Pumpkins in the 90s were willing to let the band fail rather than deal with their own limitations as musicians or their own limitations with work. Because the way I am is if that takes 12 hours to record something, I'll do it. They want to be there 1 hour and go to the club, So it's very difficult. With this band, it's very mature. So if I say you need to work on it, they will work on it. So it's a much healthier situation.
You revealed that Oceania is a part of your forthcoming conceptual album, Teargarden by Kaleidoscope. I suppose it's 44 tracks album, you're supposed to do it. And what's the main difference of so-called conceptual album of this next one, Teargarden by Kaleidoscope, of all other band albums of Smashing Pumpkins? Okay.
Well, starting with the first Pumpkins album, Gish, in 1991, every album really was just a reflection of where the band was. And we made those albums thinking there would be no end. That the music would go on forever and the band would go on forever. It wasn't really until Machina that I realized the band's ending and I wrote an album about the band ending. Teargarden really was, Jimmy Chamberlain leaves the band, so now I'm the only original member in the band and I decided to continue. So for me, and when I started the idea of making Teargarden as a concept, it was, this is either going to be the beginning of a new chapter of the band, or it's going to be the actual real end of the band. Does that make sense? So it's like charting a journey very honestly. Because in the 90s it was all about idealism, the idealism of the times, the idealism of grunge, MTV, everything's great, kids are taking over, blah, blah, blah. Now, I don't think this anymore. Me, music is a very crushing, dirty business. So I'm making music from a very honest place in a very dark, against a very dark world. And in America is very dark right now. I mean, I don't know if you can feel that from here, but my country is very dark right now. It's more dark than it was in the 90s for sure. I mean, even with what was revealed where they're spying, not only on Americans, but they're spying on the whole world. They're spying on you too. So living in this world and documenting as an artist, the end of my dream or the beginning of a new dream, I thought was an interesting approach to take. So that's sort of the concept. Now, obviously, I'm not always writing about myself directly. It's more in symbolic terms. But it's a symbolic journey of that journey.
Did you feel more freedom when you stay alone in the band?
No.
Or you felt some lack of enthusiasm?
No, I always had freedom. I look back now, I really appreciate, that the original band members gave me a tremendous amount of freedom musically. The things we didn't get along with really didn't have to do with music. That was really the shame that band did last, because musically we were very compatible. We really saw the world with the same eyes, musically. it was more personal, because to fuel like a train, to fuel the engine of Smashing Pumpkins, particularly in the mid-90s when it was MTV and newspaper, magazine cover, boom, boom, boom. They just didn't want to keep going. And to me, as almost like a performance artist, I wanted to see how far we could push the envelope, because as an art project, it's very rare that an avant-garde artist makes it into the mainstream. Like when Andy Warhol made it into the mainstream in the late 1960s, he subverted the idea of what it is to make art. This is an art. You can't paint a Campbell's soup can. You can't call a silver balloon art. And he said, I say it's art, right? So Smashing Pumpkins was penetrating the idea, the hypocrisy, hypocritical ideas of what it means to be alternative, what it means to be indie. We were literally the counter insurgency to things like what is now like Pitchfork, or this snobby indie world that says we're so cool, we have the right mustache, we listen to the music like this, the rest of the world is dumb. We always thought that was completely stupid, because we came from a working class world that doesn't make those same distinctions. Usually people who make class distinctions in music tend to be from upper middle class and rich families, and they tend to be white, which is very interesting. Those are the people who tend to have the most opinions about music. If you talk to people who are from lower income situations, especially if they have backgrounds in indigenous music, tribal music, folk music, like you come to Europe and people still listen on some level to their folk traditional music, they don't have these same snobby pretensions about music. Why? Because they don't have time to. Because their life is reflective of a struggle. And it's not always a struggle against an evil. It's just a struggle to make the money, to pay the rent, to take care of grandma. So this is what I come from. So I hate this pretentious stuff in music. So when Smashing Pumpkins was penetrating into the mainstream world, and we were turning that world upside down, the fact that we couldn't hold together internally was the shame. Because musically, we were getting it done.
And I'd like to know, well, the moon is like 100 years old. Are you also inspired by the art which is recent, or are you looking back to the history, more inspired by old films or music?
I mostly only watch old movies, and mostly interested in art, say between 1960 and before. And sometimes I ask myself why, because there are many good modern artists. But I think something about technology has made art too self-reflective. I know, to use myself as an example, when we started the band in the 1980s, even though we were in a major city like Chicago, we were essentially isolated. We were isolated from New York, we were isolated from Los Angeles. So the music we made was very strange to someone from New York. So when we went to New York for the first time in 1990 or something, they said, "What is this music?" But because we had 2 years to make the force and momentum of the music our own. And I think now, if you're a photographer and you're 17 years old, you're putting your pictures on Instagram, you're putting your pictures on Facebook, you're getting too much self-reflection, too early. You never really find your voice, because the general average person will always steer towards the known. And it's the job of the artist to always find the unknown. Which is why a great photographer could take a picture in this room that we would go, "Oh, that's a great picture," and everybody else would take it and say, "What's the big deal about this picture?" Why does the great artist see something in this room that maybe I wouldn't, right? So I think self-reflective culture, and particularly right now in pop music, the self-reflective aspect of pop music, it's almost like the classic, the snake eats its own tail. You're singing about the same, how many more pop songs do we need about the party? Or going to the club, or rolling with my crew. It's unbelievable. But it's so self-reflective that it's almost become part, it's like, they say in country, what do they sing about? My wife left me and my dog died. So why is art so self-reflective? Because it tends towards the middle. And when you have a world voting on Facebook and Twitter, the artists tend to go towards the middle, because this is the place of the biggest number. But it doesn't mean the middle understands it. Now, when someone actually creates something really, really beautiful and new, people do tend to show up. But can that artist survive the initial wave of doubt? And I think that usually has to be found within the artist's own heart and small community first, and I don't think they have that opportunity now.
I just know a line from one song, and it says, "Freedom is an illusion generated by your brain," and that's Mr. Reject's song.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't think it's important to be political, because politics is not for everybody, but I think it's important for artists to embody the spirit of freedom, if that makes sense. So I hope that I embody the spirit of freedom. Like I think I'm a smart person, maybe I'm stupid, right? But I think I'm a smart person. I know what people think of me. I know what the press says about me. I know this one doesn't like my voice, and this one doesn't like my song. I walk through my whole life hearing, you're this, you're not that, blah, 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 blah. The real thing is to not change who you are because of what the world thinks. And to me, that's how I embody the freedom to be myself, which is imperfect. And in many ways, that's why Smashing Pumpkins is a more important band than most of the bands of the 90s, because we didn't bend to the trend of the times, which looked free, but really wasn't.